Hello everyone, and welcome back to Jack's Run. We're starting on page 96. Now, on here, we've just ended where they have been captured. They are pretty sure they're on a plane. Their parents do know about this, but they are to keep everything away from the police. They have a few demands Alonzo has set up with the people who have captured them. So what's going to happen? Let's find out. So, if we go back just a little bit, she glared at him with the most unusual eyes he had ever seen. The irises were golden with almond-shaped pupil, like a snake. Jack would not have been surprised if she hissed at him. "Do your business and be quick about it." She slammed the door. It took about 3 minutes for enough feeling to come back into his hands to do his business. When he finished, he took a look at himself in the mirror and wished he hadn't. There was a large goose egg on his forehead and dried blood from the man with the nosebleed all over his face. He washed, then gulped down several little paper cups of water from the stainless steel washbin. Snake Eyes was waiting for him outside the door. He expected her to retie his hands and put the hood back over his head. Instead, she pushed him back down the aisle a few seats past Joanne and pointed. He sat down, and before he knew what was happening, she had handcuffs snapped around his right wrist and the armrest. "If you open your mouth," she warned, "the hood goes back on." He really wanted to ask her who she was and where they were going, but he kept his mouth shut. Snake Eyes did not strike him as the type to give someone a second chance. She walked back to where Joanne was sitting. "Okay, your turn." When Joanne returned, Snake Eyes made her sit down in the seat across the aisle from Jack. She handcuffed her to the armrest, snapped their photograph, then stepped behind the front bulkhead, presumably to email the image to their parents. "I'm sorry," Joanne said quietly. Jack put his finger to his lips and shook his head. He did not want that hood back on. He glanced at his watch, then looked out the window. The sun was rising on the left side of the jet. Stretching beneath them was an endless sea of blue, which had to be the Pacific. The coastline was too far away to see anything clearly, but they had been flying along the west coast of Central or South America. Snake Eyes came back down the aisle without so much as a glance in their direction. Jack craned his neck around and saw her disappear into the lavatory. "You have nothing to be sorry about," he whispered. Joanne didn't hear him. She had put her seat back and was sound asleep. Neil and Patricia spent the entire night trying to figure out what to do. By sunrise, they still hadn't reached a decision. Physically exhausted and emotionally spent, Patricia got up from the sofa. "I can't think anymore. I'm going to try and get some sleep." "Good idea," Neil said. "There's nothing we can do until the package gets here anyways." Neil was tired too, but he knew he would not be able to sleep. He put on his running gear and stepped outside the humid morning. His usual route was down to the Manteo Harbor and back, but today he headed west, past the site of the Lost Colony, and over the bridge to the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. Running calmed him and helped him to think more clearly. The other reason for the run was security. This is why he chose to run over to the refuge than the harbor. The labyrinth of dirt roads crisscrossing the refuge were seldom traveled. If Alonzo's people or the authorities were watching or following him, Neil could spot them out here. The most obvious solution to the problem was to do what they asked. Give them the diary, feed information from the prosecution's case to Alonzo's attorney, then, at the last moment, change his testimony. Neil would go to prison, which he was more than willing to do if it meant Joanne and Jack would be freed, unharmed. But there was no guarantee that Alonzo would fulfill his part of the bargain. Neil looked at his watch, surprised to see he had been running for nearly an hour. He hadn't seen a single car since he had gotten to the refuge. To make sure he wasn't being followed, he jogged over to a tree he had spotted the last time he'd come this way. In the upper branches was a camouflage stand for deer hunting. He climbed up to it and scanned the roads, thinking about what he should do. Their second option was to tell the marshals what had happened. Patricia and he discussed this at great length, but it was not really a consideration anymore. Jack and Joanne were no longer in the country. Neil was certain of that. It would take the various law enforcement agencies weeks to organize a rescue. By then, it would be too late. There was a third option, which he had not discussed with Patricia because it was too crazy, too risky. But it might be their only chance. Neil got back to the house just as a delivery truck was pulling up to the curb. He took the small package from the driver and went inside, surprised to see Patricia up. She was standing at the kitchen table, drinking a cup of coffee. He handed her the package. There was no message on the small handheld, just a photo. Jack looked a little better than he had in the previous photo, although there was an ugly bruise on his forehead. Joanne was disheveled but appeared unharmed. "They're on a jet," Neil said, pointing to the tiny screen. "You can see the rows of seats in the background." He hesitated, then said, "I'm not going to change my testimony. I'm not going to do what Alonzo wants." Patricia gave him a resigned nod, as if she expected this. I'm not going to tell the marshals the kids have been kidnapped either, he continued. They'd never be able to pull off a rescue in time. You're right, Patricia said quietly. This was not the reaction Neil had expected, but he pushed on anyway. I have to get out of here before Doris and Don find out about Joanne's television debut. As soon as they do, they're going to round us up and put us someplace safe. I can't help the kids if I'm locked up in some hotel. You're going after Jack and Joanne, she said. Yes. That's what Sam thought you would do, Patricia said. Sam Sebastian? Neil asked in shock. He called right after you left. How did he get our phone number? I didn't ask, Patricia said. He heard about Joanne. He wants us to fly to Elko to meet him. If we leave for the airport now, we can be there this evening. Why? Neil asked. Flying to Elko, Nevada was definitely not part of his plan to rescue the children. Sam wants to help us, Patricia answered. You can't do this alone, Neil. How's Sam going to help? First, he's going to try to stop the marshals from coming after us. He thinks Alonzo has sources inside the marshal service. As soon as they find out we're gone, Alonzo will know where he went after the kids. We? Neil asked. You're not coming with me. They're my kids too, Patricia said. It's too dangerous, Pat. You have no idea what these guys are capable of. I'm going, Patricia said. End of subject. She walked into the bedroom and came back carrying 2 bags. Let's go get our kids. Neil couldn't help but smile. Patricia was a step ahead of him, as usual, and she was going with him, whether he liked it or not. End of subject. The cell phone rang. He answered and repeated the words the computer gave him for the very last time, then disconnected. We won't need this anymore, he said, setting the cell phone on the kitchen table. Time to go. There's a plane to Salt Lake City that leaves in 4 hours, Patricia said. From there, we can catch a commuter flight to Elko. Somewhere along the way, I need to dye my hair. Sam said. Wait a second, Neil interrupted. I have some ideas about how to go about this myself. The first thing we're going to do is steal a jet. I know a very paranoid dope dealer who has a dozen secret hangars across the U.S. and Latin America, just in case he needs a fast getaway. The closest one is a short cab ride from the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. Then what? I guess we fly to see Sam. And he hoped he could talk her and Sam into staying there. It was a good place for Patricia to hide out until all this was over. Now, what's this about dyeing your hair? Sam's idea, Patricia answered. No one in Elko knows what you look like, but everyone there knows me. He thought it would be a good idea if I changed my appearance. She glanced at him in the mirror. I've been thinking of changing the color anyways. What would you think of a raven-haired beauty with very short hair? I'd love her, no matter how long or what color her hair was, Neil said. Let's go. Joanne slept during most of the flight, which was just as well. Jack was sure that whatever she was dreaming about was better than thinking about the situation they were in. Snake Eyes, their flight attendant from hell, didn't sleep at all. She was coiled up 5 rows back, reading a trashy supermarket rag. When Jack was a kid, he used to play this game called Where in the World is Dad? He had a map of the world in his bedroom with routes laid out in different colored yarns. His father would call and ask, Where am I, Jacko? With a watch and an airline schedule, Jack was usually able to figure out exactly where he was. He was playing a new game. Now, called Where in the World Are Jack and Joanne? He knew that Alonzo was from Bogota, and he didn't think that's where they were going. By his rough navigation, they had passed Colombia several hours ago. The jet banked sharply to the east towards the Andes Mountains, waking Joanne. She blinked a few times, then let out a moan of dismay when she remembered where she was. Jack tried to give her a reassuring smile, but it didn't have the effect he wanted. She started crying silently. Jack could not stand to see his sister cry, or anyone else for that matter. He looked out his window, concentrating on the magnificent mountains stretching north and south as far as he could see. On the other side of the mountains, the jet started an ear-popping descent. Leveling out over a hilly agricultural area, Jack tried to figure out where they were. No rainforest canopy, which meant they weren't over Ecuador or Peru. That left Argentina. They passed over a town. He tried to remember the names of cities in Argentina. The only one he could think of was Buenos Aires. But the town below was too small and too far west. The jet descended onto a wide green valley, then flew over a huge lake with a paved runway along the shore. The landing gear snapped into place, and a few moments later, they came in for a landing and taxied to a stop. As Snake Eyes unlocked their cuffs, Jack thought about slugging her and running for the hatch. But where would he go once he got inside? And there was Joanne to consider. He couldn't very well leave her behind. As if she could read his mind, Snake Eyes locked her golden gaze on him and said, "Don't try anything. We don't need to keep both of you alive. In fact, it would be easier if one of you were dead." She recuffed them together, left to right wrist, then shoved them down the aisle to the exit. The jet was parked at the end of the runway. A van with the back doors open was waiting for them at the bottom of the steps. Snake Eyes tossed their suitcases into it as if they were empty. Jack looked towards the hangar at the opposite end of the runway. Above it was a large sign. Before he had a chance to look around further, Snake Eyes pushed them into a windowless van, slamming the doors behind them. As they drove away, they heard the jet engines restart. "Where do you think we are?" Joanne asked. "Asnar Vineyards," Jack said, "in Mendoza, Argentina." "As in South America?" "Unless they move the country? Yeah." "This isn't funny, Jack. How do you know?" "I read the sign above the hangar. Alonzo has a vineyard?" "Apparently." "Who's that woman?" "Snake Eyes?" "I have no idea, but she is plenty scary." "I think she's wearing contacts," Joanne said. "Why would someone make their eyes look like that?" "For effect." "Creepy." About 5 minutes later, the van slowed and came to a stop. When Snake Eyes opened the back door, she was talking to someone in Spanish on a two-way radio. She signed off, clipped the radio onto her belt, and said in English, "Bring your suitcases." Handcuffed like they were, getting the bags out was easier said than done. Carrying the bags is going to be even harder. The van was parked near what looked like and smelled like a horse barn. Snake Eyes pointed to a small door. "In there." "What is this?" Joanne asked. "No talking." The van drove away as they half dragged, half carried their suitcases through the door. Inside were 30 stalls, 15 on each side, most of which were empty. Aside from Snake Eyes, there wasn't another human in sight. She stopped them in front of a stall with a black stallion in it. Jack wanted to suggest that they might be more comfortable in an empty stall, but held his tongue. The sign above the stall said, "Diablo." Jack didn't know much Spanish, but he knew enough to know the name meant devil. "Stay clear," Snake Eyes said, grabbing a halter hanging on a hook near the stall. He only likes Raphael. Who's Raphael? Jack thought, but he didn't dare ask. "He also hates children," Snake Eyes said. He didn't seem to like Snake Eyes much either. They stepped back and watched as she tried to slip the halter on. Diablo danced around the stall, kicking and biting. Jack cheered him on silently, hoping he would stomp her to death. But it was no contest. Snake Eyes was as quick as a rattler and had the halter buckled on in less than a minute. She led Diablo past them and cross-tied him in the walkway. "Pick up your bags and get into the stalls." "You've got to be kidding me," Joanne said. Snake Eyes was clearly surprised at the outburst. Jack wasn't. The reason he'd never gotten a dog as a kid was because of Joanne's dislike of animals and the messes they left around. She really had a phobia about it. A single mouse dropping would send her up a wall, literally, with surgical gloves and a bucket of disinfectant. The stall was actually pretty clean, with only one pile over in the corner, but that was one too many piles for Joanne. "Get in the stall," Snake Eyes repeated, snatching a riding crop off the wall. "We better do what she says," Jack said. Joanne shook her head. "I've had enough of this." So had Jack, but he didn't think this was the place to make a stand. Snake Eyes was moving towards them with the crop raised. "You'd be surprised at what one of these will do to your face," Snake Eyes said. This was about the only thing she could have said to change his sister's mind. Jack did not like the sly smile Snake Eyes gave them when Joanne jerked him into the stall. She was not smiling because Joanne had obeyed. She was smiling because she had just discovered two of Joanne's biggest fears: filth and effacement. Snake Eyes knew how to control her now. Turned out that Joanne had given her the information for nothing, because they were just passing through. A hidden door slid open in the back of the stall. Beyond the door was a stairway. Snake Eyes unlocked the cuffs and pushed them through the passageway. Jack and Joanne bumped their suitcases down the steep stairs. At the bottom was a short cement hallway with a single door at the end, which Jack was certain concealed an elaborate torture chamber. Snake Eyes reached into her pocket and took out a ring with several keys on it. She found the one she was looking for, opened the door, then pushed back. Jack and Joanne inside. The door slammed, and they heard the key turn. They were locked in. It was not a torture chamber. Far from it. There was a living room with a sofa and a couple of comfortable-looking chairs, shelves full of books, DVDs, videos, a big-screen television, a stereo system, a good-sized kitchen stocked with ample food, 2 bedrooms with king-size beds, a fully stocked bar, a utility room with a washer and dryer, and a large bathroom, which Jack used immediately. When he came back out, Joanne was looking at the DVDs and videos. "They're all old westerns," she said. Jack went over and looked at the books. All of these were westerns, too. In fact, the whole place had a western motif, including the leather sofas and chairs, which were covered with the cow hair still on the hide. I guess it isn't so bad as far as prisons go, Joanne continued. How long do you think they'll keep us here? Jack shrugged. What do you think Mom and Dad will do? Joanne asked. Again, Jack shrugged. I don't understand what they want from us. What they've always wanted, Jack said. They want Dad to back down, and they're using us to make him do it. Will he? Sure, he answered, with a lot more confidence than he felt. We'll finish this page. That was my 15-minute timer. When then they'll let us go? Joanne asked. Jack hoped the answer would be yes, but he had his serious doubts. The apartment had a permanent feeling to it, as though they had just been buried alive. What worried him even more was that, except for Snake Eyes, they hadn't seen anyone since they got there. The pilots hadn't opened the cockpit door, they hadn't seen the van's driver, and there were no grooms in the barn. Nobody knew they were here. The grave was unmarked. What are you thinking? Joanne asked. Jack wasn't quite ready to share his concerns with his sister yet. I'm thinking about how hungry and tired I am, he said. Joanne heated up a couple of cans of stew, which Jack gulped down like a hungry wolf. After he finished, he stumbled into a bedroom, flopped down on the bed, and he was asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. 6 hours later, he was rudely awakened by the light snapping on and a slap to the face. Snake Eyes jerked him to his feet by his hair and had his arm twisted behind his back before his bleary eyes could focus. You don't need to! Shut up! She tightened the pressure on his arm and hair and marched him into the living room in his underwear. So, let's see what happens next time. Have a great day, guys. Bye.